All throughout time, there have been enemies who made themselves known by their rage, their insults, and their violence. They do not hide behind soft words or subtle deceptions, they come loud, brash, and obvious. And the world has watched as Islam has been treated not as a religion of devotion, but as a target. A target for mockery. A target for war. A target for blame. From ancient crusades to modern conflicts, the hostility has rarely gone quiet. That kind of enemy, though dangerous, is recognizable. You can see him. You can name him. And you can resist him. The obvious enemy doesn't pretend to be neutral. He burns the Quran in public squares and calls it free speech. He uses the name of the Prophet in the same breath as slander and poison. He funds wars in Muslim lands and then wonders why there is unrest. He imposes his system over our values and calls it liberation. This enemy shows up on screens, in textbooks, in speeches from podiums that claim moral high ground. And yet, he rarely pauses to look at the mirror and see the blood on his hands or the damage of his lies. And as painful as it is to admit, many Muslims have grown used to this type of enemy. We've seen his colors. We know his weapons: media distortion, political pressure, bombs and sanctions, military invasions under the banner of peacekeeping. But beneath all that, his aim is the same: to break the spirit of the Ummah. To weaken belief. To destroy dignity. To silence the voice of truth. But history has shown something remarkable: when this enemy rises, so too does the heart of the believer. When the external attack becomes fierce, the internal flame often grows stronger. That is why the Quran prepares us for this very struggle. Allah does not promise a life of ease, but He promises clarity. You will surely be tested in your wealth and yourselves, and you will surely hear from those who were given the scripture before you and from those who associate others with Allah much abuse. But if you are patient and fear Allah, indeed, that is of the matters worthy of determination. Surah Al-Imran, 3:186. The Quran does not hide the truth, this struggle is part of the path. The enemy will come. And when he does, the believer is not meant to shrink, but to stand. Not in hatred, but in strength. In dignity. In truth. This enemy seeks to shame Muslims for the strength of their beliefs, yet deep down, he fears that strength. He fears the one who kneels before Allah and refuses to kneel before man. He fears the clarity that Islam brings in a world drowning in confusion. He fears the unity of the Ummah, even if fractured, because he knows the moment it awakens, it becomes unstoppable. And so, he throws every weapon he can. He uses films, books, and news headlines not to inform, but to deform. He labels Islam with words like radical, extremist, backward, while ignoring the systems that have brought destruction to entire regions of the earth. But still, Islam remains. The Quran is preserved. The Adhan still rises before the sun. The name of Allah is whispered by millions every hour. No amount of noise has been able to drown it out. And that fact, that undeniable resilience, is what unsettles this enemy the most. But this is not about anger. It's not about revenge. The believer does not act from rage. The Prophet never called his companions to destroy the enemy, they were called to outlast him. To be better. To reflect the beauty of revelation even when surrounded by ugliness. That is strength. That is power. That is Islam. A strength that shines in the face of open hatred, not with violence, but with unwavering truth, undeniable patience, and the calm of one who knows that Allah sees all, records all, and never forgets. And in this struggle, let no Muslim be fooled into thinking they stand alone. For every scream against the Ummah, there is a silent verse speaking comfort. For every insult hurled in arrogance, there is a prayer rising in humility. For every attack on faith, there is a soul somewhere turning toward the Qibla for the first time, moved not by hate, but by the very strength that hate tried to destroy. So yes, the obvious enemy is real. He is fierce. But he is also clear. And sometimes, that clarity is a mercy. Because when you can see the enemy, you can prepare. You can unify. You can awaken. And the enemy that comes openly may cause pain, but he also calls the Ummah to rise. The wounds that come from the outside are painful, but the ones that come from within, they cut deeper. When a stranger strikes you, you defend yourself. But when a brother turns against you, you're left breathless. And that is exactly what's happening in our Ummah. The second enemy of Islam is not loud. It doesn't arrive waving flags of opposition. It lives inside the body, feeding off pride, division, arrogance, and spiritual neglect. It's not wearing the uniform of an enemy, it wears the name Muslim. And yet, its damage is often far greater than the ones we so easily point at beyond our borders. The Prophet said, "Beware of suspicion, for suspicion is the worst of false tales, and do not look for the faults of others, nor spy, nor hate each other, and do not desert one another. O Allah's worshippers! Be brothers." But we've moved so far from this command. We've turned the Ummah into factions. Divided by tribe. Divided by language. Divided by politics. Even divided by levels of religious practice. One group labels another. One sect mocks another. One nation bombs another, all while claiming to serve the same Allah, pray the same prayer, and fast the same Ramadan. The truth is hard, but necessary. Islam's greatest weakness today is not the external threat, but the lack of unity among believers. When we allow nationalism to be stronger than the bond of La ilaha illa Allah, when we allow worldly agendas to split the ranks of those who face the same Qibla, we are not fighting the enemy, we are feeding him. The Ummah bleeds not because the blade is sharp, but because we keep cutting one another. And this is not a new problem. Even in the earliest days of Islam, division was warned against. Allah said, "And hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided." Surah Al-Imran, 3:103. He didn't say be united in culture, or politics, or nationality. He said hold to the rope of Allah. The rope of revelation. The Quran. The Sunnah. But instead, we hold to flags. We hold to history. We hold to wounds that should have healed, yet we keep reopening them. We love to talk about enemies of Islam as if they all live outside. But what about the enemy of ego? The enemy of arrogance? The enemy of backbiting and slander within our own communities? What about the masjid where people are judged for how they look instead of how they pray? What about the debates online that tear scholars and students to pieces in the name of protecting Islam? These are not the actions of protectors, they are the tactics of the enemy working through us. The Quran is not just a shield against the disbeliever, it's a mirror for the believer. And when we hold it up, what do we see? Are we embodying the mercy, the justice, the humility that the Prophet walked with? Or are we just wearing the label of Muslim while moving like everything he stood against? There is a sickness in the heart of this Ummah, and it is not cured by conferences or slogans. It is only healed by sincere repentance. By returning to the Quran not just as a book of barakah, but as a book of instruction. By treating each other not as enemies, but as family. By putting the Ummah above our nafs. Because right now, every time we tear one another down, we are building up the strength of those who want to see us fall. And yet, hope is not lost. The Prophet said, "My Ummah is like the rain. You don't know whether the beginning or the end of it is better." That means revival can still come. But it won't come through competition. It will come through compassion. It will come when the heart of the believer breaks more over the pain of a fellow Muslim than over his own pride. When we stop fighting to be right and start fighting to be righteous. When unity becomes more important than applause. When we remember that Allah does not change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves. This second enemy is quiet. It whispers. It divides. But it only wins when we stop recognizing it as the threat it is. And the moment we expose it, name it, and turn back to what made us one, it loses its grip. Because no matter how loud the enemies outside become, the Ummah only truly falls when it forgets how to stand together. There is a kind of enemy that doesn't knock down the front door. It slips in quietly through the back gate, with a smile, a handshake, and the language of peace. It doesn't burn Qur'ans or wage wars, it attends our conferences. It funds our institutions. It praises the moderate Muslim and offers platforms to voices that subtly reshape the religion. This is the third enemy of Islam, the one that pretends to be friendly. And it is by far the most dangerous. This enemy doesn't demand that Muslims leave Islam. It only asks that they adjust it. Just a little. Be a little less committed. Don't take the text so literally. Don't talk so much about Sharia. Let go of the parts that don't fit into the modern world. The push isn't toward disbelief, but toward dilution. And the tragedy is, many don't see the danger. They see opportunity. Inclusion. Acceptance. And slowly, the line between truth and falsehood begins to blur. But Islam was never meant to be adjusted to fit into the world. It was sent to transform it. To challenge it. To purify it. Yet here we are, being told that to be accepted, we must hide the parts of our deen that offend. We must quiet the ayahs about justice. We must avoid the hadiths that speak of accountability. And some begin to comply. First out of fear, then out of habit, and eventually out of belief that this is the way forward. This friendly enemy is not dressed in battle gear. It's dressed in cultural influence, media narratives, academic respectability. It works through think tanks and television hosts who tell us that to be relevant, we must first become like everyone else. They celebrate Muslims who stop speaking of Allah and start speaking only of shared values. They promote a version of Islam that's toothless, deprived of discipline, emptied of commands, stripped of spiritual power. It offers visibility, but at the cost of invisibility to God. It gives us seats at tables, but those tables require that we leave our principles at the door. And when we do, we lose far more than we gain. Because a version of Islam that is pleasing to everyone is no longer Islam. It's a mirror of whatever society wants it to be, and that mirror shatters the moment truth is needed. The Prophet warned us of a time when people would follow others, even if they enter the lizard's hole. And today, many are chasing the approval of those who do not believe in the Quran, do not honor the Prophet, and do not respect our way of life. Why? Because we've been conditioned to believe that acceptance by the world means success. But what does it profit a soul to gain the world's applause and lose the pleasure of Allah? This enemy, the one that disguises compromise as kindness, is far more dangerous than one who comes openly. Because it doesn't provoke resistance. It invites participation. It doesn't attack the masjid, it tries to slowly reshape what's taught inside of it. It doesn't deny the Quran, it reinterprets it until obedience becomes optional. And while Muslims may resist a bomb, we may not even notice a softened sermon that no longer challenges the heart. We must not mistake praise from the world as approval from the Lord. The Prophet was not loved by every society. He was resisted, slandered, mocked. But he never changed the message to be more palatable. He delivered the truth because it was the truth, even when it cost him comfort, safety, and popularity. If we are to resist this most subtle enemy, we must return to the core. To the unshakable, unfiltered words of Allah. To the way of our messenger. We must speak with wisdom, but never at the expense of clarity. We must live with kindness, but never surrender conviction. Because once the deen is compromised in the name of peace, it no longer brings peace, it only offers silence. And silence in the face of falsehood is not neutrality, it is surrender. This is not the time to water down the truth. This is the time to hold it higher than ever. Because the most dangerous enemy is the one who makes you forget that there was ever a line to begin with. What makes this friendly enemy so devastating isn't just the way it creeps in unnoticed, it's what it leaves behind once it's done. Because when Islam is diluted, its power is lost. Its fire dims. Its clarity blurs. Its ability to transform hearts and challenge injustice fades into nothing more than a set of suggestions. You see, Islam was never meant to be convenient. It was never designed to fit the shape of every culture, every political agenda, or every generation's mood. Islam came down from heaven to lift humanity up, not to be dragged down and reshaped by it. But that's exactly what happens when this subtle enemy gets into the heart of the Ummah. Slowly, the standards begin to lower. Not publicly, not in one loud moment, but in small steps. The hijab becomes optional. The prayers are pushed to the background. Fasting is praised for its health benefits, but not its spiritual purpose. We start quoting only the verses that talk about mercy and ignore the ones about accountability. We reshape Islam into a feel-good system that demands nothing, challenges no one, and conforms to whatever the world currently celebrates. And what we're left with is a shell, something that sounds Islamic, but has no weight. No roots. No power. It can't push back against injustice. It can't heal the soul. It can't give guidance in a collapsing world. It becomes just another voice in the crowd, soft, apologetic and afraid of offending. And when Islam reaches that point, it ceases to lead. It follows. It tries to please everyone, but loses the one whose pleasure is the only thing that ever mattered. You look at the Quran, and you see a pattern of strength, not weakness. Prophets were not sent to blend in, they were sent to stand out. They were not sent to whisper, they were commanded to warn. They didn't soften the message to gain followers. They preached the truth, and let the hearts choose. Because they knew that Allah does not bless diluted truth. He blesses obedience. But today, too many are convinced that we need to modernize Islam to keep it relevant. That if we don't make adjustments, the youth will leave. The world will reject us. Our values will seem outdated. So what do? We tweak. We explain away. We compromise. Not for the sake of sincerity, but for the sake of survival. And when we do that, we lose exactly what makes this deen divine. It is not our job to edit the revelation. It is our job to submit to it. You cannot fix a collapsing world with a compromised religion. A watered-down Islam cannot quench the thirst of a soul dying for truth. And when the world burns, and it is burning, only the full flame of this deen will bring light. Not the filtered version. Not the trimmed version. Not the one stripped of its strength. Only the real thing. Pure. Unashamed. Unedited. And here's the danger, once you start compromising, there's no end to it. The moment you give up one verse, one principle, one pillar to please others, there will always be another demand. Another edit. Another area where you're asked to step back a little more. And before long, the deen becomes unrecognizable, not to outsiders, but to ourselves. That's when the Ummah becomes weak. Not because it is outnumbered. But because it has been hollowed from within. You don't need to make Islam fit the world. You need to stand on it so the world can see what truth actually looks like. Yes, speak with compassion. Yes, live with wisdom. But never, never apologize for what Allah has revealed. His word is not outdated. It is eternal. And it doesn't need permission to be proclaimed. We are not here to impress the world. We are here to witness to it. To call it back. To be the example. To carry this light, not dim it. Not hide it. Not reshape it. The moment we forget that is the moment we lose the very power we were entrusted with. So now we come to the only path forward. The only way to survive the obvious enemy, to heal from the internal one, and to defeat the so-called friendly one. It begins with revival, but not the kind that comes with slogans or events. True revival doesn't start on stages. It begins in secret. In the quiet place where a believer gets on their knees and says, Ya Allah, I have drifted. Bring me back. The Ummah will not rise because of numbers. It will rise because of sincerity. Because of hearts that fear Allah more than they fear being rejected by society. It will rise not through the approval of powerful nations or partnerships with corrupt ideologies. It will rise through clarity, through bold, unashamed, unwavering submission to what Allah has revealed. That's where revival begins. Not with popularity, but with conviction. Every enemy we've spoken about, whether loud, internal, or subtle, feeds off one thing, the absence of clarity. When we're unsure of what we believe, when we're hesitant to declare it, when we're afraid to act on it, that's when the enemy gains ground. But the moment we return to what made this Ummah strong, the Quran in its full strength, the Sunnah in its full beauty, the guidance of our Prophet in its full authority, something shifts. The fog begins to lift. The distractions fade. And the Ummah starts to move with purpose again. That's what's needed right now. Not just emotional speeches. Not just reactionary protests. But a deep, disciplined revival of the heart. Of character. Of worship. Of truth. We don't need to create a new version of Islam for modern people, we need to return to the timeless truth that never changed in the first place. We need Muslims who are not just aware of their faith, but shaped by it. Defined by it. Anchored in it. And revival does not begin with others, it begins with you. Before the Ummah can change, the individual must. Before communities are transformed, homes must be purified. Before the masjids are filled with light, the hearts must be emptied of darkness. And that means returning. It means repenting. It means letting go of the false security we've built around careers, reputations, politics, and influence. And instead, standing firm upon what Allah has already made clear. Revival looks like a father who begins to pray again, not just in the masjid, but in his home. It looks like a mother who teaches her children not just the rituals of Islam, but the fire and strength behind them. It looks like a youth who says, no, to the culture and, yes, to their Lord. It looks like a scholar who speaks the truth even when it costs him followers. It looks like a community that stops arguing about differences and starts crying together before Allah. And yes, it will cost you. Truth always does. You may lose friendships. You may face mockery. You may be labeled. But that's a price the prophets paid long before us. And they paid it gladly, because they knew who they were standing for. They knew that the pleasure of Allah is worth more than the applause of any world. You don't need to be perfect to spark revival. You just need to be honest. Sincere. Humble enough to say, we've gotten lost, and we need to return.